So I'm going to sort of start off at the start and talk about the fact that, I left school and I had no idea what commercial opportunities were. My father was an Anglican minister, and the clergy is not always the most commercial of people. And I never followed his lead, which probably won't surprise most people, but something must have rubbed off. And back in those days, people actually knew what was in the Bible. And currently, it seems only homophobic rugby league players know, but unfortunately, Israel's never really read enough. So, but in particular, the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 1. So I'm sure none of you in the room know what I'm talking about. And so I've seen a few people going to Google, book of Proverbs, but you'll learn all about it because it's been extremely useful advice for me. It's been the key underpinning of our industry to some extent. So I take up as a labourer, no idea what I want to do. I joined the police because that was fun and I got paid better, and they drank and they fought and they played rugby. And it was great. And then after a few years, got sick of that, so I started accounting. When I found out how boring accounting is, there's probably a lot of accountants here, but how incredibly boring that was. So I went back in 1985, I did my MBA, which was the new big thing then, and I went out and set out doing development. And I actually did, I think it was probably the first timeshare resort, sort of thing you never really confess to, in terms of a few years later. When I did it, it was like everyone would go to a cocktail party and say, oh, we've just bought my week down in Wanaka or whatever. But of course, what happened is we saw a lack of regulation, and we saw terrible marketing practices, and no one would admit to doing it. And it did actually give me a few insights about where we're going. Sometimes in our business, I just knew if we got it wrong and were seen to rip off old people, we were done for, which I hate to say, sort of some things have happened over here that we've been lucky haven't happened there. But one day I was driving back down from the Bay of Islands, because I managed to acquire the management of about 15 of these timeshare resorts, because early 1990s was very, very economically stagnant in New Zealand. You were lucky if you could earn a crust, and that's how I sort of paid the groceries. I grouped these together and got a management company. And then what happened is I'm driving down, and we stopped off at a place and my uncle was living at. And my father, rather disparagingly, used to call it Club Med. And it was a retirement village. It was a lifestyle retirement village. And it had 70 units, which were complete and full. It had a community centre, which had cost several million to build back then, and it had 30 acres of vacant land. But the guys doing it, there were no laws. So we had a Securities Act that you're supposed to do it by, which didn't work. And the guy had gone broke because he tried to avoid GST. So what happened is I thought, gee, it's a lot of land, and it's a big building with a big swimming pool, so I'll buy this, Didn't have any money. But somehow I managed to turn around and put a bid in mortgagee sale and acquired it and got some partners in. And then I went to the very first retirement village conference in New Zealand. It was 1995. It was a wee hotel, half-day conference. And someone said DMF, and I said, what's that? And they explained it to me, and I said, oh, that's how villages work. Oh, okay. So I went back and I worked really hard, and after a couple of years and a whole lot of lawyers' fees, I managed to get the 70 units in the bucket, and I had a village. And away we go, and it was pretty good. But I still wasn't really into it, because I was young and I was silly, and I thought things like hotels were sexy. They were far sexier than doing villages. Villages had old people. And while I was sorting this out, I managed to turn around and acquire some land, and I was going to build this Queenstown hotel, because I've always wanted to build one down there. So, and then I picked up another little one. I developed that hotel, and I got involved with some others, usually distressed product, which was my sort of modus operandi. And in fact, I even purchased a Fijian resort island at one stage. Was that early 2000s, which I later sold out. So I did a lot of property plays, and I'm going through this retirement village thing. And in fact, I'll just show you some of the hotels. A lot of you will have actually stayed probably at these. So the one up the top left, that's Sofitel Queenstown. That was a distressed asset. So a lot of you 60% of the guests in that hotel are Australians. Probably a big chance some of you stayed there. And the one on the right's actually also in Queenstown, the first hotel. I built that in 98. That's St. Moritz. Two Accor hotels, by the way. And then that's the big one on the left is what used to be Holiday Inn. I rebadged it as Ridges, Wellington, close to the Parliament. And the middle one's a wee spa town, and the one on the right's the Fiji, and I managed to get out of that, but I managed to keep some property in the way, so that was pretty good, because Fiji can be a pretty tough place to do business in. So I had some associations, got involved, learned how it worked, and everything's going pretty well. But I still wasn't really into retirement villages. And then what happened? We had the first AGM for this one I'd restructured and put together. And something really amazing happened at the end of it. There was a number of people, there would be 200 plus in the room. And they were all slightly overcome because they had years of worry, it hadn't worked. And they all lined up like long conga line to shake my hand. And I thought, these people are shaking my hand and they're so happy, and I've got this business. And I think I'm going to do pretty well out of it. It's really good. And I suddenly realized what an amazing business we have, where we really can satisfy people to lengths where you receive letters and phone calls and hugs for giving people the security and satisfying their peace of mind, and you're getting paid very good money for it. You know, it's a perfect combination of what I call care and commerce. So I thought, neat, I'll do more of these. And I knew this woman who owned a company, whose husband had tragically died early, had 4 villages. I knew that the market hadn't really read how valuable the villages could be. So what I did, I went and saw this lady. I remember telling her, she was going on a cruise, and I said, lie back on the deck chair, just think that how you could do this every day of your life, Bev. And she came back and said, I'm ready to sell. So I managed to line up a financial partner, and sure enough, we got the 4 villages. And then something happened. I thought I was pretty happy, and I was going to run this thing. And I came across to a conference in Melbourne. Some of you would have been here at this time. And I was going to increase my knowledge. Now, and I saw that one of the topics on the speaking thing was new developments in retirement villages. And I thought, wonderful, I'm going to learn about how you make people happier, or what you build, or how you brand it or something to make it all good. It must be really fantastic, because the speakers are from AMP and Macquarie, Babcock and Brown. So these guys are going to really know their stuff. And I showed up, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, wanted to learn all about these new trends in retirement villages. And what do I find? They were talking about monetarising the DMF. They were talking about tax treatment on certain ways. They were talking about all the financial models. And there was not one discussion about the consumer or the product that we offer. And I just felt like 1987 all over again. And I went back and slightly disheartened, and I told my financial partner, that's okay, I'm going on a holiday now, it's 6 weeks to settle. But I was a bit upset, the fact that I think they've got ahead of themselves in Australia. He was smart enough to realise what was going on. I arrived back 6 weeks later, he said, I've sold them. I said, what do you mean sold? I haven't paid for them. No, I've sold them. And we sold them, sure enough, to one of those Australian partners, one of the people I mentioned, and pocketed quite an indecent margin. So it was a great outcome. Now, I'm not sure if there are spirit guides or if there's some magical force that we'll have, but I can tell you what, about a year later, GFC hit. So, I'm a believer. And once that period moved on, I thought, right, now I can get back into it. So now it's time to get onto my topic. So when I think about the hotel business, and I think about retirement business, I think about the strategic issues and the operational issues. And we heard it just before when we heard the speakers. I was listening to the speakers talking about what they would want and the baby boomers would want. And dealing with that strategic side, it's all about segmentation and branding, I think, is coming. And we all know it's part of the hotel game. In fact, far more than you realise. And the retirement village industry is going to see this. In fact, it really is already seeing it. And one of the moderator of the last, Ryman's are, at the moment, currently, the ultimate, what I would call mid-scale brand in retirement villages. And they have been super successful, and there's a reason for it. We think, by the time I got back involved in it, in fact, I'd been to lots of hotel conferences, I had relationships with Accor, I had relationships with what's called events that own ridges, local domestic brands, Heritage, some other New Zealand independents, and I learned the brands were quite new. You see, everyone thinks that a hotel's been around forever and brands have been around forever in hotels. They actually haven't. I mean, Accor, you all know about, it started in 1967. This year, in 2019, was the oldest hotel company. Hilton had its 100th birthday. And it had about one brand until about 25 years ago. And you look at the Ridges brand, you'll know. It started in '61 with Alan Ridges.